Well, welcome back to another episode of Talking Hymns with Shane and Tim. It is a great week to do another great hymn, Tim. And this week's hymn is Great is Thy Faithfulness. I'd like to think that in our time together, Tim, we've been coming forward in time. So we started our very first week with "A Mighty Fortress is Our God," and it's one of the older hymns we sing. And then we move forward a little bit, jumped a couple hundred years. We're moving even more forward in time.
Which is not to say we're going to continue to move forward.
Because at some point it's going to have limits.
We're going to have to, back off.
Either that or we find some sort of organ-based time machine where we can jump forward and find the great hymns of 100 years from now.
That's cool.
Yeah. We'll work on that. So let's see if that works. Yeah. But this week we're doing Great is Thy Faithfulness. Let's talk a little bit about this hymn. You want to start us off?
We both were saying it's kind of interesting when you do the research and find out some facts about hymns. Not every hymn has facts, of course. Some are just what they are. What I found interesting about this is that it is considered a hymn for ordinary Christians. It's not written because of a conversion experience. Mm-hmm. It's not written because you have mended your ways doing slave trade.
Yeah, which is interesting because our previous 2 weeks were dealing with fellas that had lived pretty rough lives.
Pretty rough lives, yeah. This man was evidently born in Kentucky, wrote this hymn at the age of 57.
And who we're talking about here, his name is Thomas Chisholm.
Chisholm, I believe you'd say.
Chisholm, okay.
Yeah, probably the L would be silent. Yeah, and he called himself an old shoe, evidently just a real comfortable sort of old guy with health limitations. He refers to his frail condition a lot. He did convert to Christianity, had a conversion when he was about 27, I believe. Okay. I might be making these up. And he became a minister, I think when he was like 36.
Okay.
But then had to quit a year later because of his frail health. And he wrote poems, lots and lots of poems.
Yeah.
So sounds like a very sweet guy, unassuming, sold insurance for a living, said he never had much money, but he was always grateful for how faithful God had been to him.
Yeah, I've always associated this hymn with gratitude for some reason. Although maybe, I don't know what it is because it's not explicitly a gratitude hymn, I guess. But
it's a recognition hymn or something.
Yeah, a recognition, and maybe that's because that's where gratitude, the recognition of who God is and what God has done just leads to gratitude for some reason. It's just always been there. If I think of gratitude and you said name a hymn, I would probably jump to this one. Yeah.
I don't know if I would pick this one for whatever reason, but I am so glad we did today for this session. I have a new appreciation for it. I consider it so atypical of a hymn. The writing, having the verses and a refrain. We haven't had anything with a refrain before.
Yep, first week with a refrain, yeah.
And this is the first totally American hymn we've talked about. The text and the melody, which was written specifically for this poem,
which is a first so far in this as well.
The first so far.
Yeah.
Chisholm evidently knew somebody that was in charge of Hope Publishing. Runyon was his last name. Hope is still publishing, too. It does a lot of religious music publishing. He sent it to the guy blindly, said, he sent him several poems, but this one really caught Runyon's eyes. And Runyon decided to make a special melody for it. This was in 1927?
Yeah, that's what
Something
I read.
Like that.
Somewhere in there.
So, we are moving into the 20th century at least. But it evidently caught on so big time. George Beverly Shea, I can remember seeing albums when I was a kid in the record stores. George Beverly Shea was a singer of sacred music, mostly gospel and hymn type things. It became sort of the signature song for the Billy Graham Crusades because of George Beverly Shea. It's lasting, it's enduring. I've got nothing else to say. I think the words speak for themselves, but it's not, to me, your standard hymn. It just doesn't. Again, I didn't grow up with it. So
this is a little some of our offline conversation so far as that it is a hymn in some ways that defies being held in one category or not, because to get a little sort of inside baseball for church is there are things we would call much more high church music.
Right.
And this is not high church music.
No, this is.
But as we think of worship planning, when I think high church music, I think transcendence and reverence. That's what I think. But this song is not high church music, but this song is reverent. And
in some ways it transcends.
Yeah.
You can't read the text without having to sort of say, good one. Yeah, you're right. We should be grateful for that. Yeah, day after day.
Yeah. And so when you talk about all the different, the smorgasbord of musical styles available, specifically, with the explosion of contemporary music, which now is, it's hard to even define as one thing anymore because some things are very rock or folk or blues or, and then the whole, the spectrum of gospel music. But typically, the more contemporary one gets in music, that music tends to focus on the immanence of God, the closeness of proximity. God, God in my heart, God near to me. And you certainly get that with some hymns, with things like, as we talked about, in the garden.
Yeah, sure.
But when you talk with hymns that deal with reverence, it typically comes with transcendence, and this is a weird one that in some ways checks every box. It's traditional, it's liturgical, it's a little high, it's a little low, it's a little transcendent, it's imminent, it's a little bit of everything.
And it's a little bit, in my ears, a little bit commercial. I mean, the melody, which is mostly stepwise, occasional leap, but then everything is melody-wise, step by step by step. But there's the harmonies, the augmented harmonies. It sort of speaks of that gospel era when they were doing a lot of chromatic stuff.
But talk about that a little bit more. Let's talk about the music. Yeah, the chromaticness.
Well, I was just saying originally, like in the first measure, when you look at the hymn, the way the four parts are written out in the hymn, the tenor, the chord is a D major chord, D, A, D, F sharp. Mm-hmm. And the tenor sticks to that A for two notes, but then raises it to an A sharp, so it can go to a B after that. So you've got, at that particular incident in the first measure, you've got a sort of a jazzy kind of chord.
Yeah. It is interesting. You look at that very first measure and you say, you see the chord signature and all those things, but three notes in, you got an accidental.
Right.
And then you get in that second line, and then you're looking into the shadow of turning with thee. You almost have a whole measure of accidentals.
Exactly.
Where you have this shifting around.
And it's going to, not to get too nerdy musically, but it's going to a secondary tonic, which is dominant at this point. It goes to another key for a while.
Yeah.
And same in the refrain. It sings the refrain in its tonic key, D major. Great is thy faithfulness. Then it sings the same thing,
yes,
a third higher.
Yeah, that's right.
No, I'm sorry, a third lower, because it
third
goes
lower,
to B.
Yeah.
Well, it actually is going to E, but that's beside the point. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Mm-hmm. So that gives it a double emphasis. I'm going to say this twice.
Yeah, which is interesting because those type of shifts to a modern ear that's familiar with stuff that play on a radio, you don't hear that a lot.
Right.
But it works, but the song still works even for a modern ear.
I think so.
It's super interesting.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, let's talk maybe a little bit about some of the lyrics. One of the things I noticed is that, and we were talking about different phrases in the song we like, and I've always liked the third verse where he says, "Strength for today and a bright hope for tomorrow." That seems like pretty relevant lyrics right now, absolutely, and that's why we're going to be singing this in worship on Sunday. Because I said to Stephen, I said, "Hey, we're doing this on Wednesday. This is absolutely the song we should be singing right now." And so
I don't know how we're being guided. It is so funny that so many of the hymns that we pick have such a relevance right now, and it wasn't that we set out to find the relevant hymns, they just sort of appeared.
Yeah, another thing I hit on was, to continue that. Strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow, blessings all mine with 10,000 beside.
The number,
exactly. So within the biblical text, there's numbers that step out, stand out. 7, 12, 40, those are the big ones. And But for some reason in music, 10,000 starts jumping out there. So, when we've been there 10,000 years, which we were talking about last week, you have this song, Blessings Are Mine, 10,000 beside. And I brought that into a modern world because about 10 years ago, Matt Redman, an English contemporary musician, wrote a song called 10,000 Reasons, which has been one of the more popular praise songs. And I wonder what it is about 10,000, because that doesn't, in terms of like, lyrically, it doesn't roll off the tongue,
And try to rhyme thousand. I mean,
Yeah.
with what?
Yeah.
Thousand?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's sort of the number. It just implies big, lots of stuff.
Yeah. Somebody at some point said, "Oh, 10,000's the answer." Maybe
Yeah,
I don't know. I would have thought with the $100,000 pyramid from years ago, we'd get more to 100,000.
Yeah,
but maybe that didn't work
this has
that way.
better syllables or something.
Any other lyrics? Talk about the refrain in particular. Anything about that?
Well, no, the refrain, again, being a refrain, it sort of imprints itself on you with the repetition of those words. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies.
New mercies. That's an intro. New mercies.
Yeah.
Not just the same old mercies, new surprises.
Yeah.
I think that one's interesting now because I've been thinking, and I was listening to a podcast the other day that was talking about some of the psychology of what we're going through. And while it's probably fair to say at this point, our society as a whole is suffering some degree of societal depression, a corporately sensed depression. And that's, we look at the events of this last week, everyone's stressed out about an election. We have fires on one coast, multiple hurricanes on another coast, and that for a place like Nashville, we have on top of that, we have, yet somehow we don't even talk about this tornado that ripped our city in half years ago.
And we're still reeling.
And we're still reeling. I mean, I just drive, 2 or 3 blocks south of me, and there it is.
Yep.
And, we personally have friends that have had to be relocated because they were in a basement while the top of their house blew over, And we have that, and we have, this derecho from weeks ago, just, so much stuff going on. But the way that relates back to depression is that way we kind of mark time. So if we think about this last summer, we didn't get to do the things maybe we normally done. And so as human beings, we often mark time by novelty. And so for me, it's hard for me to remember this summer because there wasn't enough novelty to help me mark the time. And so when I hear that phrase in that light, morning by morning, new mercies, it's maybe God is teaching me to be open to more subtle surprises that are novel.
Correct.
Good and I've heard that from some of our congregation. It's, the new mercies are a deeper commitment to the already existing relationships because we have people that are spending more time, and a lot of it's virtual time, but they're more time. We have a group that prays at 8 every morning and 8 every night. And so some of those individuals are literally seeing each other, checking in each other once, twice a day.
Great.
Going on, I've heard a lot of people they're going on a lot more walks. I've heard from parents whose college students stayed with them for months and months that, had a connection they just didn't know. And so I think, that's something when I sing this Sunday and I sing at our Friday worship service, that's something I think I'm going to keep an eye towards, that new mercy. What's the new mercy I receive? And depending on how old one's hymnal is, the next line, all I have or hath needed, God has provided. God hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Those are lyrics we need today. All that we need, God has provided. And I think the challenge for us there spiritually is to come to grips with God knows what we need better than we do.
Well, and the fact, it always seems so personal. The thank you is more than just, I really appreciate this stuff. It's thank you, God, for being so faithful to me. Mm-hmm. You've been really good to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that, it's just, this is the exact hymn we need to be singing right now, for sure. So here it is. Great is thy faithfulness. So, Tim, for today's interpretation of this hymn, what have you chosen for us?
I've chosen a piece called "Great Is Thy Faithfulness."
Okay.
Yeah, it's related to the. Golly, now suddenly I can't remember the guy's name. It's Douglas Wagner, I think. I don't know very much about him. I see his name frequently in organ collections of this kind of stuff, hymn preludes.
Yeah.
It's sort of what I call one of those cocoony kind of arrangements.
Okay.
The left hand at the beginning is just sort of this lulling, rocking, sort of a lullaby, like do 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 do, and then the melody comes over it. It's just sort of a comfort rap. And it doesn't get big because, like we said, this is not one of those hymns that
this seems like a
fares well
song.
with big.
If you blow this thing up, you blow the song up. It becomes unrecognizable.
Now, I do get a bit of a loud toward the very last time that I played the phrase "Great is thy faithfulness," but then it backs right down again.
Exactly. Yeah. There's that swell. There's a really good, and I'll try to find it and put it on here. There's a really good a cappella version of this that our music director Stephen Nix did with some of other vocalists here that captures that. It has this song has a breathing nature to it. That swells and falls. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It breathes nicely.
Any other things about this you'd like to highlight for us? Any fancy footwork?
Totally not fancy footwork.
Okay.
Which is surprising that I'm making as many mistakes as I am for something so simple. I blame it on the new shoes.
The new shoes, that's it. That's a very helpful foil right now. So here it is, this week's interpretation of Great Is Thy Faithfulness.
Great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassion, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, great